The hardest pain is not when a woman leaves you. It's when she stays long enough to destroy your confidence, your peace, and the version of yourself you once respected. And if you don't learn how to handle that pain correctly, you will either become weak or emotionally dangerous. So stay until the end, because today you will learn how powerful men protect their heart without losing their dignity. When a woman hurts you, the first thing that usually disappears is your emotional control. Your mind becomes filled with confusion, anger, disappointment, and obsession. You replay conversations in your head, overanalyze every message, every cold reply, every moment she changed her tone, and without realizing it, you slowly become emotionally consumed by someone who is no longer treating you with care or respect. This is exactly why so many men destroy their dignity after heartbreak. Not because they are weak men, but because emotional pain pushes people into emotional reactions. The problem is that emotional reactions almost always make the situation worse. The moment you start reacting from pain instead of clarity, you lose your power. You begin texting too much, explaining too much, begging for answers, asking for reassurance from the same person who created the confusion in the first place. And the more emotional you become, the less attractive your presence becomes. People naturally respect emotional stability because it signals self-control, confidence, and maturity. But when someone sees that they can emotionally disturb you so easily, they begin to understand how much control they have over your emotions. Many men believe reacting emotionally will make a woman understand how deeply she hurt them. They think if they explain their pain clearly enough, she will suddenly feel guilty, apologize sincerely, and change her behavior. But the reality is that people already know when they are hurting you. Repeated disrespect is rarely accidental. When someone continues crossing your boundaries after seeing your pain, it is no longer confusion. It is a choice. And one of the biggest mistakes a man can make is trying to force loyalty, care, or respect out of someone through emotional pressure. Real respect is never begged for. The moment you start pleading for basic decency, the dynamic already becomes unhealthy. This is why emotionally intelligent men pay more attention to behavior than promises. Words can comfort you temporarily, but behavior reveals intentions clearly. Someone may say they love you while continuously disrespecting your peace. Someone may promise change while repeatedly doing the same things that damage your trust. Emotionally reactive men become addicted to words because words give temporary hope. Emotionally disciplined men observe patterns because patterns reveal truth. One disrespectful action can hurt you, but emotional reactions often create long-term damage that is even worse than the original pain. A man who reacts impulsively often loses his self-respect afterward. He sends messages he regrets. He chases someone who is pulling away. He becomes aggressive, desperate, possessive, or emotionally unstable. And later, when the emotions calm down, he realizes he abandoned his own dignity trying to hold on to someone who was already emotionally disconnected. This is why emotional discipline is one of the most important forms of strength a man can develop. Emotional discipline does not mean pretending you do not feel pain. It means refusing to let pain control your decisions. It means understanding that your emotions are temporary, but your actions can permanently damage your image, your confidence, and your peace of mind. A calm man sees situations more clearly because he is not blinded by emotional chaos. He understands that sometimes silence protects him more than arguments. Distance protects him more than emotional confrontation, and self-control protects him more than emotional revenge. One of the most dangerous things a man can do after being hurt by a woman is romanticize his suffering. He starts believing that the more pain he tolerates, the more meaningful the relationship becomes. He convinces himself that struggle is proof of love, that emotional chaos means passion, and that constantly fighting for someone who keeps hurting him makes him loyal or emotionally strong. This mindset destroys countless men because it teaches them to normalize emotional damage instead of recognizing it as a warning sign. Many men stay attached to women who disrespect them simply because they have emotionally invested too much to walk away. They think leaving would mean giving up, failing, or losing something valuable. So instead of protecting their peace, they keep sacrificing more of themselves, hoping the relationship will magically return to how it was in the beginning. They become addicted to memories, addicted to potential, addicted to temporary moments of affection that keep them emotionally trapped inside situations that continuously drain their confidence and stability. Pain has a strange way of making people emotionally irrational. The longer someone suffers in a relationship, the harder it becomes for them to leave because the brain starts associating emotional survival with emotional attachment. This is why some men continue chasing women who constantly ignore them, manipulate them, disrespect them, or emotionally neglect them. Deep down, they are not only afraid of losing the woman, they are afraid of accepting the truth that all their effort, patience, loyalty, and emotional investment may never be rewarded. And instead of facing that reality, they keep convincing themselves that if they love harder, tolerate more, stay longer, or suffer silently, eventually she will recognize their value. But real love does not require you to destroy your mental peace to earn basic respect. A healthy connection does not constantly leave you anxious, emotionally exhausted, insecure, or emotionally starved. The problem is that many people grew up believing love must be painful to be real. They associate emotional instability with deep connection because peaceful love feels unfamiliar to them. Chaos becomes exciting, uncertainty becomes addictive, and emotional inconsistency creates obsession because the mind becomes trapped in a cycle of seeking validation from the same person causing the pain. A man who romanticizes pain slowly loses the ability to recognize when a relationship is damaging him. He starts making excuses for unacceptable behavior. He tolerates disrespect he would never normally accept. He lowers his standards just to keep someone in his life. And eventually, he becomes emotionally dependent on moments of temporary affection. One kind message suddenly feels enough to erase weeks of neglect. One small apology becomes enough reason to stay despite repeated betrayal. This emotional cycle weakens self-respect because the man stops prioritizing his own emotional well-being. Instead of asking, does this relationship bring peace into my life? He only focuses on, how can I stop losing her? And once fear becomes stronger than self-respect, emotional suffering becomes permanent. This is why emotionally mature men understand an important truth. Love should add value to your life, not constantly test your emotional survival. Pain is not always proof of loyalty. Sometimes pain is simply evidence that you are remaining too long in a situation that is unhealthy for you. The strongest thing a man can sometimes do is stop trying to force love where respect no longer exists. When a woman hurts a man, his ego immediately wants a reaction. He wants her to feel the same pain he felt. He wants her to regret losing him, regret disrespecting him, regret choosing someone else, regret making him feel small. This is why so many men become obsessed with revenge after emotional pain. Some try to win arguments. Some try to expose the woman publicly. Some desperately try to prove they are doing better without her. Others jump jump into new relationships just to make her jealous. And while these reactions may temporarily satisfy wounded emotions, they rarely bring real peace. In fact, revenge usually reveals emotional weakness rather than emotional strength. The more desperate someone becomes to prove a point after heartbreak, the more obvious it becomes that they are still emotionally controlled by the situation. A truly powerful person does not waste energy trying to emotionally punish people who hurt them. They understand that healing is more valuable than revenge, and protecting their peace is more important than winning emotional battles. Most people underestimate the power of silence because silence feels passive. They think strength means confrontation, dramatic speeches, emotional closure, or making the other person suffer equally. But silence is often the strongest response because it removes emotional access completely. When a man stops arguing, stops explaining, stops chasing, and stops reacting, he immediately regains control over himself. Silence creates emotional distance, and emotional distance creates clarity. When emotions are high, people often say things they regret, act impulsively, or embarrass themselves trying to force understanding from someone who no longer cares enough to listen. Silence protects dignity because it prevents emotional desperation from becoming visible. It allows a man to process pain privately instead of emotionally collapsing in front of someone who may no longer value his vulnerability. And this is something emotionally mature men understand deeply. Not every betrayal deserves an emotional performance. Some situations deserve quiet withdrawal. Some people deserve absence instead of arguments. One of the biggest mistakes men make after being hurt is over-explaining themselves. They write long paragraphs trying to make the woman understand their pain. They repeat the same conversations hoping for different outcomes. They continuously seek closure from the same person who caused the confusion. But closure does not always come from conversations. Sometimes closure comes from accepting reality without needing additional explanations. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, ignores your feelings, lies to you, manipulates you, or emotionally damages you, their actions already explained everything clearly. Continuing to chase explanations only keeps emotional wounds open longer. Silence, on the other hand, creates emotional boundaries. It teaches you how to separate your emotional stability from someone else's behavior. And more importantly, silence forces people to experience the consequences of their actions naturally. Many people never truly value someone until they lose access to them completely. Constant reactions keep emotional doors open. Silence closes those doors without drama. There is also a deeper psychological power in silence that many people fail to understand. Silence communicates self-respect. It sends the message that you value your dignity more than emotional chaos. It shows that you are capable of walking away from situations that disturb your peace instead of constantly fighting for validation. Revenge often keeps two people emotionally connected through anger, resentment, and obsession. Silence breaks that emotional connection. It redirects energy away from the person who caused the pain and back toward personal growth, healing, discipline, and emotional recovery. A man who masters silence becomes difficult to manipulate because he no longer reacts impulsively to emotional triggers. He learns how to control his emotions instead of allowing emotions to control him. And once a man develops that level of emotional discipline, he stops feeling the need to prove himself to people who failed to appreciate his value in the first place. Pain changes people, especially emotional pain. When a man gives his loyalty, trust, time, and emotional energy to a woman who eventually hurts him, something inside him shifts permanently. The way he sees relationships changes. The way he trusts people changes. The way he expresses emotions changes. And this is where men face one of the most important decisions of their lives. They can either allow pain to make them wiser, or they can allow pain to make them bitter. Many men do not realize how dangerous bitterness becomes because it slowly hides itself behind pride, emotional coldness, and defensive behavior. A bitter man may appear strong on the outside, but internally he becomes emotionally poisoned by past experiences. He starts believing all women are manipulative, all relationships end badly, and vulnerability only leads to suffering. Instead of healing, he builds emotional walls so high that nobody can genuinely connect with him anymore. He stops seeing individuals and starts judging everyone through the lens of his previous pain. And while bitterness may temporarily protect the ego from future disappointment, it also destroys the possibility of healthy love, emotional peace, and personal growth. One painful relationship can completely transform a man's personality if he does not heal correctly. Some men become angry at the world after heartbreak. They lose patience, become emotionally unavailable, and carry hidden resentment into every future interaction. They no longer trust kindness because betrayal made them suspicious. They no longer trust affection because disappointment made them fearful. And eventually, they become emotionally disconnected from themselves. This is what unresolved pain does to people. Instead of processing emotions properly, they suppress them, deny them, or convert them into anger. But suppressed pain never disappears. It only changes form. Sometimes it becomes insecurity. Sometimes it becomes emotional detachment. Sometimes it becomes toxic behavior toward future partners who never caused the original damage. A man who refuses to heal often starts punishing innocent people for wounds created by someone else. He becomes emotionally reactive, controlling, jealous, or emotionally distant because deep inside he fears experiencing the same pain again. The tragedy is that many men think this emotional coldness makes them stronger, when in reality it only proves the pain still controls them. Emotionally intelligent men understand something important about suffering. Pain is supposed to teach lessons, not destroy identity. Every difficult experience reveals something valuable if you are willing to learn honestly from it. Sometimes pain teaches you that you ignored red flags because loneliness made you desperate for connection. Sometimes it teaches you that you tolerated disrespect because your self-worth was weak. Sometimes it reveals emotional dependency, lack of boundaries, fear of abandonment, or the habit of chasing validation from people who never truly valued you. These lessons are painful because they force you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. But growth only happens when a man becomes self-aware enough to recognize his mistakes without allowing those mistakes to define his future. Strong men do not pretend they were never hurt. They simply refuse to remain emotionally trapped inside that pain forever. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? They begin asking, what is this experience trying to teach me about myself? The difference between a bitter man and a wiser man is not the amount of pain they experienced. The difference is how they responded to it internally. A bitter man uses pain as justification for negativity, distrust, emotional cruelty, and emotional avoidance. A wiser man uses pain to strengthen his standards, improve his emotional discipline, and become more selective about who gains access to his life. He stops chasing unhealthy connections. He values peace more than temporary excitement. He learns how to protect his emotional well-being without becoming emotionally closed off to the world. Most importantly, he refuses to let heartbreak transform him into someone he does not respect. Because once pain turns into hatred, resentment, or emotional toxicity, the person who hurt you continues controlling your life long after they are gone. One of the most painful things that happens to many men in relationships is that they slowly stop recognizing themselves. At the beginning, they are confident, focused, ambitious, emotionally balanced, and connected to their own goals and identity. But once they become emotionally attached to a woman, they begin making her the center of their emotional world. Their mood starts depending on her attention. Their peace depends on her behavior. Their confidence depends on her validation. And without realizing it, they slowly abandon the parts of themselves that once made them strong. This transformation rarely happens suddenly. It happens quietly through small sacrifices repeated over time. A man cancels his priorities to be constantly available. He ignores his purpose to focus entirely on the relationship. He tolerates disrespect because he fears losing her. He suppresses his opinions to avoid conflict. He becomes emotionally dependent on moments of affection, and eventually his entire identity becomes attached to keeping one person in his life, no matter the emotional cost. This is dangerous because once your happiness becomes completely dependent on someone else, you hand them emotional control over your life. Many men believe sacrificing themselves proves love. They think constantly prioritizing a woman above their own needs makes them loyal, caring, or emotionally committed. But healthy love never requires self-destruction. There is a difference between compromise and self-abandonment. Compromise is healthy because both people respect each other's needs while maintaining their individuality. Self-abandonment happens when one person slowly loses their confidence, boundaries, emotional independence, and sense of self just to avoid losing the relationship. This often happens because of fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of starting over, fear that they may never find love again. These fears push men into emotionally weak behavior where they tolerate situations they know are unhealthy simply because the thought of losing the woman feels more painful than losing themselves. And this is why emotionally dependent men often stay in relationships that continuously damage their mental health, confidence, and self-respect. They become so focused on keeping someone else happy that they completely forget to ask themselves whether they are emotionally happy at all. The problem with losing yourself for someone is that eventually the relationship itself becomes unhealthy. When a man abandons his purpose, standards, and emotional stability to constantly seek validation from a woman, he unknowingly creates emotional imbalance. He starts chasing instead of leading his own life. He becomes anxious, insecure, overly available, and emotionally reactive because his identity is no longer grounded within himself. Ironically, the more he sacrifices his own individuality to keep someone, the less attractive his presence often becomes. Confidence naturally disappears when a man stops respecting himself. Passion disappears when life revolves entirely around emotional dependency. This is why emotionally mature men maintain balance in relationships. They love deeply, but they never lose their connection to themselves. They continue building their goals, protecting their peace, maintaining their friendships, focusing on their health, and preserving their personal growth even while emotionally committed to someone, because they understand that a relationship should complement their life, not consume their identity completely. A man should never have to betray himself just to feel loved. The moment you start accepting disrespect, neglect, manipulation, or emotional instability because you are afraid of losing someone, you begin teaching yourself that your emotional needs matter less than keeping the relationship alive. This destroys self-worth slowly from the inside. Over time, you stop feeling emotionally secure because deep down you know you are abandoning your own standards to maintain temporary attachment. Real love does not demand that you shrink yourself emotionally to remain accepted. Real love should inspire growth, peace, emotional safety, and mutual respect. And one of the strongest things a man can learn is how to walk away from situations that require him to sacrifice his dignity, purpose, emotional health, and identity just to keep someone close to him. When a woman hurts a man deeply, his mind immediately starts searching for ways to regain control over the pain. He imagines making her jealous, proving his value, becoming successful so she regrets losing him, or somehow finding a way to emotionally hurt her back. This is a natural emotional reaction because betrayal damages the ego as much as the heart. A man begins questioning his worth, his importance, and even his identity after emotional rejection or disrespect. And because the pain feels unbearable, revenge starts looking attractive. He wants to win. He wants validation. He wants to feel powerful again. But what most people fail to understand is that revenge keeps you emotionally connected to the person who hurt you. The more obsessed you become with proving something to someone, the more power they continue holding over your emotions. Real healing begins the moment you stop trying to make someone regret hurting you and start focusing on becoming someone who respects himself deeply enough to never accept that kind of treatment again. Because the greatest revenge has never been emotional destruction. The greatest revenge is self-respect. Self-respect changes the entire way a man responds to pain. Instead of begging for attention, he creates distance. Instead of humiliating himself, trying to force love, he accepts reality with dignity. Instead of chasing closure endlessly, he recognizes that some people reveal everything through their behavior already. A man with self-respect understands that not every relationship is meant to survive, and not every person deserves unlimited access to his emotions. This does not mean he stops feeling pain. It simply means he stops allowing pain to control his actions. One of the clearest signs of emotional maturity is the ability to walk away from what damages your peace, even when your emotions still feel attached. Most people remain trapped in toxic situations because emotions overpower self-respect. They continue tolerating lies, disrespect, inconsistency, and emotional neglect because they fear losing the connection more than they value their own dignity. But eventually, this emotional dependency destroys confidence completely. The person becomes desperate for crumbs of affection while slowly losing their identity in the process. Self-respect interrupts that cycle. It reminds a man that his value does not decrease simply because someone failed to appreciate him properly. There is something incredibly powerful about a man who chooses discipline over emotional chaos. Instead of becoming bitter, angry, or obsessive after heartbreak, he focuses on rebuilding himself quietly. He improves his mindset, his physical health, his emotional intelligence, his purpose, and his boundaries. He stops trying to prove his worth to people who overlooked it and starts proving it to himself through growth. This is why self-respect is more powerful than revenge. Revenge seeks external validation. Self-respect creates internal stability. Revenge is driven by wounded ego. Self-respect is driven by emotional awareness. And while revenge may create temporary satisfaction, self-respect creates permanent transformation. A man who rebuilds himself after pain becomes emotionally stronger because he no longer bases his identity on whether someone chooses him or leaves him. He develops standards. He becomes more selective about who enters his life. He learns how to recognize emotional red flags earlier. Most importantly, he stops abandoning himself just to maintain emotional attachment to people who continuously disturb his peace. Many people think strength means fighting harder to keep relationships alive, but true strength is sometimes the ability to let go with dignity when respect no longer exists. Self-respect teaches a man that love should never require humiliation, emotional begging, or constant suffering. It teaches him that peace is more valuable than temporary emotional attachment. It teaches him that walking away from disrespect is not weakness. It is emotional maturity. Because once a man truly values himself, he stops chasing people who only value his attention when it is convenient for them. He no longer needs revenge because he understands that becoming emotionally stable, mentally strong, and deeply connected to his own worth is already the most powerful response possible to anyone who once tried to make him feel insignificant.